Hello and welcome to GameSpot's coverage of Cyberpunk's Night City Wire Episode 2. We're very excited for this. We're going to go over what we saw last time, what Tamor and I played, and what we hope to see today. The show starts at 9:30 though, so we're going to fill this time, chat about what we expect. But joining me today is Tamor Hussein.
Hi.
And Jean-Luc Seipke.
Hello.
All right, so we do know a bit about what this Night City Wire is supposed to be. They tweeted last week, I believe, that for episode 2, they're going to cover Lifepaths. They're going to cover the weapons we'll be using and Samurai, the band in the game, which is played by the Swedish hardcore band Refused. But before we get into that, Tamor, you and I had the chance to play some Cyberpunk about a couple months ago, and we both chose different life paths. You chose the street kid path. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you saw?
Yeah, so I guess for people who might not know what a life path is, being slightly reductive, it's effectively a origin story for your character. It kind of reminded me of Dragon Age Origins and a couple of the other BioWare titles, but it's basically set up for your character where they begin. So I picked the street kid path, which is pretty much what you can imagine. Like, the street kids are very, very familiar with Night City. They have some kind of they are embedded in the underground and the seedier part of Night City, so they're very familiar with the ins and outs of the underworld, and have their own biases, and already are super cool with killing and doing wet work and taking on corpos and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I picked the street kid path, and my character began in kind of like this bar where you're trying to help out someone else and kind of steal this car which you're seeing on screen currently. That effectively, this car, I believe it belongs to an Arasaka employee, and it's a super high-end car that you're trying to steal. And it turns out there's someone else also trying to steal it, and here he is, young Jackie. So this is how the kind of V-Jackie relationship begins in the game if you pick the street kid path. What I liked about the street kid path was you could use your understanding of Night City and your history there to kind of intimidate people who aren't from there, and kind of assert your dominance. It's kind of like when you roll into someone else's hood and they're like, yo, you're not from here, what are you doing here? You should watch what you say and where you walk. And that kind of manifested in the bar where I was, where one of the people that I was speaking to was giving me a mission and was being a bit too braggadocious and perhaps not respecting me or Night City, and it was just kind of a throwaway line that was kind of like, you better watch what you say, you're new in town, you're not from here, whereas I am, and I can make things happen. So it kind of like took the power dynamic in that conversation and switched it up a bit, which I really enjoyed. So I'm interested and I'm excited to see how that street kid path manifests in other ways. But at the very least, baseline, it's a familiarity with the city and a kind of confidence in moving around the social circles of the city.
Yeah, and one thing to clarify here is that we saw, so Tamor, myself, and Edmund Tran each played this, and we each chose different life paths, and we only played like the first 2 hours. So depending on what life path you choose, the sort of, I guess, prologue chapter, you could say, will be not slightly different, very different. So for example, I picked the Nomad path, and with the Nomad path you actually start outside of Night City, and I believe what's called the Badlands. And basically, normally nomads roll with like a gang, but you are a lone wolf type. It's clear that you kind of, I don't know, recently had a falling out with whatever gang you were a part of, and now you picked up a job to smuggle something into Night City. This is where it starts off, in this garage you're seeing right here. You're fixing up this old junker. But after this, you basically meet up with Jackie as well. And so the gist of it is that Jackie plays a different type of Jackie, I guess, depending on which origin story you pick. But no matter which origin story you pick, Jackie will still be a key character, at least for the opening hours. I don't know if I'm sure you guys all saw that trailer, but in that cinematic trailer they released, I think last E3, he actually died in it. So I'm curious to see what the deal is with that. Like, maybe that was based off a decision you can make, or if that was just kind of to get people, I don't know, to show the brutality of this world. But once you meet with Jackie, there's a package that you need to smuggle into Night City, and there's actually this pretty cool like border crossing scene where you show up, you pull your car up, and they ask you to step outside, and they want to interview you, and you go inside this border office, and you get interviewed by this cybered up dude with like glowing eyes, and he's got all these cybernetic enhancements on his arms and whatnot. And you can bribe him if you want, and I chose to bribe him, and he let me through. And as I started to drive through, of course, I think they were Arasaka Corps, like set up a roadblock, and then there was just like this big firefight leading in. You actually do open the case to see what you're smuggling. I won't spoil it. I'm sure other places have spoiled it because a lot of people saw it, but I thought it was a cool little thing. But then the other path we have is the corporate path, which is something that I didn't personally get to see, neither did Timur. But you can kind of put the pieces together there. You start out as a corpo, and you pretty much lose everything. And you can see kind of the opening here as well. Jean-Luc, though, you didn't have a chance to play it. However, you're very excited for Cyberpunk. I was curious, what life path are you leaning towards?
I was initially thinking I'd go with Nomad because it's the most... Your character is like outside of Night City, so I feel like it's a good introduction. Your character can kind of like, it gives your character an excuse to like not know what's going on and be unfamiliar with the world, as opposed to like a street rat. It would feel a little more like, oh, I should know like what the city's like, but I don't because it's my first time playing. That said, I might end up going actually with Corpo, just because you are a corpo for Arasaka, who seems to be a major player in the story. So I feel like that has the most potential for story ramifications later down the line, as far as like the cause and effect of the origin story, like playing out later in the game. Like I could see a situation where, because the main point of the game is that you're trying to steal a piece of prototype tech from Arasaka in sort of like the first prologue chapter of the game. So I could see you knowing people in Arasaka and that leading to alternate paths in that main quest. I think that could be really interesting.
Totally. And I'm super excited to see what the Corpo path has. But speaking of which, Timur, do you have any predictions on how these life paths could change the game, or maybe just like different mechanics? Because so far we know that there are different dialogue options and there is a different prologue, but I was curious if you had any predictions as to how the game could change.
I'm not sure if I want to kind of predict it, mainly because CD Projekt Red, they're pretty good at doing the unexpected with things that you think you should know how they work. Like they like to turn things upside down. And also because given the kind of how open the D&D kind of or the tabletop version of this is it could be literally anything. It could be anything, it could be nothing. And I would hope that they'd make the effort to make both of those interesting. I think the thing that I'm more interested in is how the world around you changes in response to you. In terms of gameplay, I'm sure it manifests in kind of like the kind of weapons that you're able to use, or how you spec your kind of character. It probably is easier if you lean into the street kid or nomad kind of trees, or the abilities that are complementary to that. But what I want to know is like, how do characters react to you, and how do you start to wield that background to your favor? In the opening to the street kid path, I mentioned earlier that you can assert your dominance or your authority or your street cred over people who might not be able to do the same, and kind of put that into your confidence as you move around the city. That's really cool. I hope there's more of that. And then during the demos that they show off, you have these moments where when you're going to pick up that prototype weapon, you can choose to either go straight to the kind of lair of the enemy and try and negotiate, or you can meet up with the corpo lady and get kind of like embroiled in a spy game of sorts. Which means if you are already a corpo, how does that change that kind of dynamic when you've got this, in the when she's talking to a nomad or a street kid path, she's kind of like condescending and looks down upon you and treats you like crap. And as a tool, does that change if you roll up and you're actually an Arasaka corpo? who knows? Like, that's the thing that I'm most interested in about the world, is, and how that responds to your life path is probably more intriguing to me than the actual mechanical side of it. I do think that there will be kind of these like key moments where your background will kind of derail or reroute the story in big ways. I don't know how, if that means like they're gonna kill off, you know, major characters. Like, could Jackie be killed off halfway through the corpo path because it's revealed, you know, that he's got some sort of seedy background that doesn't jive with you? Who knows? I'd love to see that kind of stuff. But yeah, the world is what intrigues me more, and how it reacts to you.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see, because there's like pretty obvious benefits to picking the Street Kid path. Obviously, you're familiar with Night City itself, and there's benefits to picking the Corpo path. You're familiar with how corporations work, but I'm curious to see what the benefits are of the Nomad, because based on what I played, like, yeah, there were different dialogue options I could pick being a Nomad, but like there's not like an obvious bonus, at least inside the city, that comes to my head. Now, I imagine when you are exploring the Badlands, there might be more to it. But I'm curious to see how that Nomad path works out. And Jean-Luc, you actually brought up something really interesting about how you start out as an Arasaka employee, and Arasaka seems to be a major villain. Do you want to expand on that at all? Maybe even like touch on what you kind of hope happens, or how different these paths could be?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess like, to not to spoil it too much, but I made a video where I kind of like put together like the pieces of the plot, and it's at least the opening of the game is based around the idea that you're like trying to steal a piece of prototype tech from Arasaka. So I feel like naturally, as I kind of mentioned earlier, the Corpo path has the most potential to be interesting with that, where you can like, oh, I know somebody on the inside who can help us get in. But then I'm curious, yeah, like I'm super curious how the other paths could affect it. I mean, like, you know, the Street Kid, like, are there connections that you have that you could use to like smuggle yourself in like an alternate way? Like, I'm so curious how that heist is going to pull off, because heists are like, to me, maybe some of my favorite like video game scenarios. Like, how are you going to pull it off? Like, I want this like Ocean's 11, like, are you and Jackie gonna like dress up as like delivery boys and like sneak into like garage, or are you gonna like pretend to be like, if you know, I could see like, oh, I'm a corpo, so we'll pretend to be businessmen who are making a deal, and we're gonna walk in with like fancy suits. Or, you know, maybe like as a nomad, you're like, screw it, I don't know anything about this city, let's just go in guns blazing. I can see myself like making a hard save and then just like loading that specific mission over and over again. I get the feeling I'm going to do that a lot in this game, is like just keep reloading saves and trying new stuff over and over again.
Yeah, me too. I imagine that'll happen with a lot of people, because it happened a lot in The Witcher 3, and this seems like even more branching than The Witcher 3. But
Yeah.
Moving on, another big thing that CD Projekt Red plans on talking about today are the weapons. We've seen a good amount of weapons in the different showcases and whatnot, but Timur, when you actually played, what were some weapons you used, and was there anything that really stood out to you?
So I picked the most boring way to play the game probably for a lot of people when talking about weapons, but so I was playing primarily stealth. Like, I wanted to see how much I could, because I love stealth games. If I get the option to be quiet and sneaky, I will almost always take it. So I did a lot of pistols. I had a silenced pistol, and I think I had a silenced rifle at one point as well. So it was a lot of like getting into melee range and taking anyone out that I could quietly, but then using kind of the silenced pistol to take out anyone else wherever possible. That stuff felt good. I think across the board, the guns felt good and they felt distinct. It kind of reminded me, I think I said this in my preview, it kind of reminded me of Destiny. I'm not saying they feel as good as Destiny, but everything kind of had a punch to it and it had a sound to it that felt like it was good feedback, which is tricky to do when the game you're playing, as is the case for Destiny 2, when you shoot someone, you know, numbers fly off of them instead of they just drop the moment you hit them. but everything felt good. I did reach a couple of points where I wasn't paying close enough attention to what I was doing, and I got caught by something, and it would erupt into straight up violence. And in that scenario, I did grab a shotgun, and my main approach was to kind of use the dashing abilities, the maneuverability that V has, to kind of get around obstacles and in enemies' faces really quickly so they can't dodge any of my shotgun pellets. And I'm up close for like super damaging melee combat. But yeah, I was mainly a pistol and a stealth person until I got close or until I needed to pull out my weapons and start using a shotgun at that point. However, I did see a couple, in the demonstration, the high frequency blade was used a couple times, and unfortunately I didn't get my hands on it in that demo, but that's one I'm super excited about. I hope they do lean into the futuristic cyber tech stuff and use that a bit more. Everything that we touched in the gameplay that we had was kind of like cool looking guns based on stuff that we already know exists. I'm interested to see if they delve a bit more deeper and lean into the futuristic stuff. I want some perfect dark style, like shoot through the walls guns.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I was about to point out that the demo we played was very early. It was like the first couple hours of the game. So I feel like we didn't really get to mess around with like super cool tech. Like I had a pistol, which shot like a pistol. I had a submachine gun that shot like a submachine gun. One thing interesting, though, that I did manage to pick up was a lead pipe, which sounds really dumb. It's not exciting at all. But I just thought it was kind of cool that it is like, that kind of RPG where I can pick up a lead pipe and just start hitting people with a lead pipe. But kind of to your point, too, Timur, one thing that we saw in I think last year's gameplay presentation was there were those like cyber wire whip things that like melted people when they hit them, and I'm really excited to use that kind of stuff and like katanas and whatnot. I'm curious to see how all that comes into play. I guess to kind of dive a little bit more into the weapons we might see, Jean-Luc, you and I have been doing a lore series where we've been looking at a bunch of the lore from this game and trying to make videos out of it. But there are a lot of weapons. I was wondering if you, I don't know, maybe had any predictions or insight into weapons we might see or weapons you'd like to see.
Oh man, I haven't dived too deep into the weapons of the lore yet. I kind of been focusing more on like characters and stuff, but I think for me, I'm most curious about melee weapons and just like how that's gonna work. You mentioned, like we see here, the blades that you can pull out of your arms. You mentioned katanas and stuff. I want to know what like an all melee playthrough would look like if that's even possible. And I'm just curious, like if they'll get real weird with it. Because yeah, as you mentioned, like I kind of want to see like weird weapons, not only with guns but also with like melee. Like how weird and futuristic can you get with like a katana or something? Like what's a futuristic katana look like in the world of Cyberpunk?
So then I guess to kind of jump off that, I'm going to throw it back to you, Jean-Luc. On your first playthrough, what kind of build do you plan on playing? Do you think you're going to do this melee experimentation build, or do you have like an idea of what you're going to do?
Well, any game that offers me a like dialogue focused path is usually what I go down. So I'll always try and put all my points in dialogue. I'll always try and talk my way out of a situation. I might try and start with a melee build and see how that goes. I'm depending on how the game works. I might have to pivot if it's not viable for all scenarios. But I think I'm gonna mainly try talking my way out of most situations if I can, and then honestly I'm just gonna pick like whatever weapon seems cool. Like I want to try like weird futuristic weapons. Like we've seen a little bit of that stuff. There's like I forget what it's called, but it's like a weapon where it like the tracer darts, like they kind of like can circle around objects and like hit people. Like I just want to try a little bit of every weird weapon they have. Like I imagine my build in my first playthrough is going to be a mess because I'm just going to pick whatever looks cool and sounds interesting, and it's probably actually going to be like a horrible build that like nobody should play, and I might have to like respec.
Nice. Timur, you love being stealthy. You love doing non-lethal gameplay and whatnot. Is that what you plan on doing for your first playthrough this game?
Yeah, that's pretty much what, because I was doing it in my demo, and the developer was like, "Oh, you're gonna have a rough time doing it here in this situation," because it was like a room with enemies like that were backed up into a corner and like very clear sight lines, and I managed to do it in that room, and to the point where the developer was like, "You managed to make that happen, but that was not how it's supposed." Like, I wedged myself in between an enemy and like a wall that looks like a spot that no one should be able to fit in. But I like just edged in close enough to grab the person, and the developer was like, "You know what? Maybe we'll just move him forward a bit so you can actually do this naturally without putting in that much work." And then he kind of like updated and said like, "Yeah, you can get through most of this game without killing." So usually, when I play pacifist runs, like the gameplay kind of enables it, whether that's through tranquilizer darts or that kind of thing. This is the first time I think I'm interested in trying to play the pacifist run through a mixture of gameplay in terms of like my physical actions and also like my dialogue options. Usually I don't think too hard about, you know, whether your dialogue is going to impact the way you are lethal or non-lethal, because games don't usually mix that well, or aren't designed to like have those overlaps. But this game definitely feels like a game where you can have those overlaps. So I think I'm going to spec into like stealth and also like charisma and good dialogue options, so I can talk my way out of things and hack wherever possible and not, you know, resort to violence as much as possible. I just love the idea of being like this street kid who's got, you know, no blood on his hands, and it's just like a sneaky thief, a futuristic Robin Hood of sorts.
So when I did the demo, I did net running, and I actually had a lot of fun net running. Now I imagine you'll probably dabble in net running no matter what build you do or hacking. And there's like a fun little mini game that shows up, and I don't know. I don't know if it'll get tiring after a while, but that is one thing I remember from my demo was like how much fun that little weird hacking mini game actually ended up being. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna play a very similar style to you tomorrow. I really want to see how far I can go with just hacking things. But moving on, we got about 10 minutes, actually 8 minutes until we go to the Night City Night City Wire. Before we do that, though, the last thing that they plan on talking about, at least mentioned in the tweet, was Samurai and how the hardcore Swedish band Refuse transformed into Samurai. This is pretty cool. I think it's the first video game I can think of that is actually having bands play a role in the game. Like, sure, it's still Refuse playing these songs, but in the game they will be known as Samurai, and they're kind of embodying Samurai. And for those who don't know, Samurai is Johnny Silverhand's band in the lore. So I'm excited to see what they end up doing with this. They've got a bunch of confirmed artists, and I think the only one that actually has been assigned a band as of now is Grimes, who is doing, was it Lizzy Wizzy?
Lizzy Wizzy.
Lizzy Wizzy. But I was curious, Jean-Luc, have you heard much of the Samurai music that has been released so far? Because there's a couple tracks.
I have. I've listened to all of them, and I love it's like essentially what they're going for is like that very like 70s 80s like post-war kind of like rebellious rock, very like anti-establishment. And I love the idea that because in the world of Cyberpunk at this point, like Samurai the band is like over 50 years old, so it's like essentially like classic rock. But I love that it's still this like super relevant band, and in the lore, like Samurai became one of the most influential bands in the world. Like I love like alternate reality fiction where like a kind of relatively niche genre ends up becoming like the dominant genre for a while in music. Like I think that's so it's an interesting way to like kind of like set the tone for the world and set up like, okay, like this is kind of like what these people grew up listening to, and this like it kind of explains the attitudes of the characters. It's funny, you can actually go like listen to they have all the lyrics on there, and they're making hints to, I think, like Johnny Silverhand's like past and how he used to like you know, be in like part of the army and stuff like that. I'm curious how that stuff is going to, like, where that stuff is going to be in the world. Because as you mentioned, all of the music is supposed to be like in fiction, so I assume a lot of it would be diegetic, where like you're actually hearing it on the radio. I wonder if you can like go like buy music or anything. I think there's a screenshot of somebody like selling like a vinyl record of a samurai. Like, can I go buy like samurai like records, like Final Fantasy VII remake style? Like, I can just go like get new music and then like put it in my car radio. Like, I would love that stuff.
So there is a radio. It's something I messed around with a lot, and if I was paying more attention, but there was so many things I was trying to focus on at once, maybe I could have seen like who the different artists were that are going to be in the game, or at least heard. But there's a radio, so you will hear a lot of that, and I did hear a couple samurai songs, at least I think samurai songs on the radio. But one interesting thing that I do want to point out is that the song Chippin' In, which they released I think at E3 last year or around that time, the chorus of that song you can actually find in Cyberpunk 2020, which is pretty interesting. Like the lyrics there of like, I forget exactly, but it's you can find those original lyrics there, or at least part of it. I'm sure they changed it a little bit, but I found that pretty interesting. But one thing I do want to do, we've got about 4 minutes left. I just want to go through the confirmed artists so far that we have. We've got Run the Jewels, Refused, Grimes, ASAP Rocky, Gazelle Twin, Elin Ruspin, Richard Devon, Nina Kravitz, Deadly Hunter, Rap Boy, Tino Guo. Probably mispronounced that. But just, Tamor, one last question. Is there a band or artist you'd like to see represented in this game somehow?
Kendrick Lamar. Easy.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some sort of Kendrick song in there. Just because I'm a huge Kendrick fan, but like there's a lot of good hip hop rap representation in there between Run the Jewels. ASAP Rocky is kind of rubbish now. After I think I'm going to go on my ASAP Rocky tirade. ASAP Rocky was only good because of Clams Casino, the producer. After he split with Clams Casino, the producer, he's been absolute trash. Don't at me. But I'd love to see some Kendrick there.
I'd love to see Kendrick actually. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I'd love to see Kendrick actually represented as a character in like a DLC or something. Well, because they're all supposed to be in universe like artists. So like I imagine like Run the Jewels. They're not supposed to be themselves. They're supposed to be like their own band in the fiction. So like I would love if they like integrated like a storyline with some of these artists. Like I'm sure Grimes' character Lizzie Wizzy is gonna probably play a major story. They seem to kind of be building her up. You've seen her in the trailer. She's the woman who's like decked out in all chrome and has like a big blue mohawk. That's her character. I think she's also maybe the woman with who like takes her mouth off and she's like doing her makeup and she's like missing her mouth. I think that's the same character. I don't know. She's not chrome in that one, so I don't know. But I would love to see some of these characters more like physically represented. Like I could go talk to the real life, the in-universe representation of Run the Jewels or Kendrick if they put him in.
Yeah, so we've only got about 2.5 minutes left, so Tay in the back might just take this away and switch over. I'll try to time it well, but yeah, I mean, Run the Jewels really stands out to me because I feel like their kind of rap is perfect for this sort of game. And I'm super curious to see what they do. Like you were saying, Jean-Luc, I really hope that there is rap producing duo that you can find and maybe do a quest for or something like that. Because I think there's so much potential to have, LP and Killer Mike play characters in this game. I think that'd be really cool. All right, we got 1 minute left. Last minute, any more hopes to see for artists? Like any quick ones you can throw out there?
I hope we get Keanu Reeves. We haven't seen Keanu Reeves in so long. Like, for Flash, give us any sort of soundbite from him, anything new. Just have him look at the camera and go, "Hey," and that's it. That's fine.
I want to hear Keanu Reeves sing in the game.
Yeah, me too.
Oh yeah.
All right, 30 seconds.
That would be good.
We'll be back with a post show. So make sure to tune in after it ends, and we're going to break down everything we saw and maybe give you guys a little bit more insight based on what we played last month. But anyway, we'll see you after.
You don't believe in no fate. Every day digging the grave. Step in the pit with the snakes. City of dreams, city of.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Night City Wire. This is the show from us at CD Projekt Red, where we talk about all things Cyberpunk 2077. In today's episode, we're going to be deep diving into Lifepaths and showing you a brand new gameplay video, as well as having a chat to Philip from our quest team. Then we're going behind the scenes and taking a look at how Refused are bringing the band Samurai to life. And then we're showing you another new gameplay video and having a chat to Pavel, our senior gameplay designer, about just some of the tools of destruction that will be at your disposal in Night City. So let's get started. Street Kid, Nomad, or Corpo? Which will you pick first?
Well, who do we have here?
Grew up in Haywood. Whole street was my family. Neighbors helped each other out. Thought nothing of it.
I'm pleased to see you have not forgotten your roots.
Born here, live here, die here.
Childhood memories. Hopping buildings, running away from badges. Iron tasted blood from a split lip.
Motherfucker!
Got everybody fighting for a slice of the street.
Get the fuck out of Vista.
If you keep getting jumped, you find some stronger choosers.
Do you want to spend the rest of your days blasting scabs? Or become a legend overnight?
We have arrived. The Major.
Ready to get your cherry bobbed? Yeah, come on!
My childhood? Let's see. Racing my bobber for the first time through the hills? Oh, and first kiss in the middle of a synth cornfield.
We nomads choose who to make our family. A choice forges strong bonds and a higher duty that stands solid as an old oak.
My family's in pieces. That's why I'm headed for Night City.
Makes you an outcast among outcasts.
Miss this, you know? Camaraderie.
I know. I saw it in your heart the first time we met.
Know what I always liked about nomads? Your taste, no, hunger for freedom. Not easy to come by in Night City. Corp's got their grubby claws and everything.
I have those reports you asked for.
They were supposed to be ready yesterday.
The world's going to tear us apart when the word gets around.
The world's never going to find out.
If I go down, you're going down with me. No! I'm not fucking joking!
This isn't a request, V. But no way you're fucked, right? You're the one who fixes other people's shit.
If you work in Arasaka counter intel, you're always fucked.
Today, they got you to zero somebody. Tomorrow, they'll get somebody else to zero you.
It's the rules, Jack. Want to be top? Gotta have some skin in the game.
Yeah, but you're not on top. Saburo Arasaka is. And you're the pendeja who keeps him there. Work for yourself, live for yourself. That's the only way.
it is so good to see you again. It's actually been a while since I've had a chance to interview you about Cyberpunk. So I think for today, we'll start with a question that everybody wants to know. How does the path you pick affect your time in Night City?
It actually affects your time quite a lot throughout the whole game, but let's start at the beginning, because basically our game has 3 different starts depending on your life path. As an example, if you choose the Street Kid life path, you have lived most of your time in Night City. You know the streets, you know the gangs, you know the slang, you kind of know what's going on in the, let's say, lower life aspects of the city, which can of course give you lots of good opportunities also later on in the game. But if you start as a nomad, you actually used to be part of a nomad clan and a nomad family, because nomads that roam the deserts around Night City, that we call the Badlands, actually value their family above anything. But for one reason or another, you actually left that family behind, and now the beginning of the game for you will actually be how to get into Night City and how to make a new life there. Then you can also choose to actually be a corpo and choose the corporate life path. And that basically means that you're not at home in the streets of Night City or in the deserts of the Badlands, but actually inside the boardroom, because you rose the corporate ladder of the Arasaka Corporation, which basically gives you the ability to sometimes, read between the lines, read people when they're trying to do business, which of course can give you many nice opportunities later on.
So this isn't just about the start of the game. Can you maybe help people understand how this translates into the gameplay?
Yeah. So the thing is, we make Cyberpunk a real RPG, and part of that is that you can play your character from the start to the end. And of course, we have these life paths affecting the beginning of the game, but we wanted to make it so you have your life path opportunities throughout the whole game until the game is over. And as an example, we do that by giving you additional options in dialogues. So I can give you one specific example. And this is a mission where you have to steal a flathead robot from the Maelstrom gang. Basically, those Maelstromers stole that flathead before from a corporate transport. And the owner of that corporate transport, Meredith Stout, wants you to do something else. And this is an optional objective. And even within that objective, we want to give you some options. So as an example, if you have a corporate life path, you basically know what Meredith Stout is really about. You can read between the lines and you can get some additional options that maybe actually later enable you to do a completely different thing with the Maelstrom gang. And if you're a nomad, you know exactly some more details about how these Maelstromers would have even been able to steal a robot like that from Meredith Stout, who's part of the very powerful Militech Corporation. As a street kid, we as an example don't give you a specific new dialogue option in that dialogue, because as a street kid, you do not have a lot of experience dealing with higher up people like Meredith Stout. But we want to give you additional options that fit your life path very well. So later when you actually talk to the Maelstrom gang, one member of the gang offers you some illegal substance, but as a street kid, you actually know what this is about. You can talk some shop with him, and that might actually make that character like you a little bit more.
So Philip, I do have a couple of extra questions for you based on the video we just saw. And the first is about nomads. So the nomad life path, this starts in a place called the Badlands. Is this somewhere you get to visit even if you don't pick nomad to start with?
Yes, absolutely. So the thing is, Night City is surrounded by this huge landscape that we call the Badlands. And you can go there whenever you want. So as an example, if you actually do play the nomad life path at the start and you are in the Badlands, you can even see Night City on the horizon. And we want to give you the option later in the game, if you want, you can just take your car and drive out of the city. You can go there whenever you want. Thing is, you might not want to, because the Badlands can be a pretty dangerous place at first, because time has not been very kind to the Badlands. There have been many wars in the past, there's global warming, so most people that do live out there don't really have another choice about it, or are nomads that love this life and are all about it and are very battle-hardened. We of course also want to tell their stories, because we want to tell many different stories throughout the cyberpunk genre, which means that you will also find missions that lead you out in the Badlands or where you deal with the people living there.
So Philip, can you tell us a little bit more about the character Padre? He's the guy we see giving his business card to Street Kid V in the video. Who is this man?
Yeah, so Padre is actually one of the fixers in Night City. And fixers are people that work as intermediaries. So if someone who has a lot of money needs a problem solved, they go to a fixer. And a fixer then finds people who can solve that problem. And these people are people like you, the cyberpunks. Fixers are very territorial. So Padre specifically works from Haywood, which is where you as a street kid grew up in, so you already know him. You might have already seen another one of our fixers who is called Dexter Deshawn, and he works in a different part of the city. So specifically Padre, you might know him as a street kid, but even if you played other Lifepaths, you might sooner or later meet him because he's operating in Haywood, which is a pretty big place with many good jobs. So if you want to make some cash there, you will sooner or later deal with Padre.
Philip, thank you so much for joining us. Now, on my first playthrough, pretty sure I'm going to be picking Nomad, but for those watching, we would love to know what you'll be picking, so have a think about it and send us a tweet. Don't forget that later in this episode, we're going to be showing you another new gameplay video and having a chat to Pavel, our senior gameplay designer, about just some of the tools of destruction that will be at your disposal in Night City. But before that, let's talk about music, because music plays a huge part in bringing Night City to life. Now, in future episodes, we're going to talk about things like radio stations and even the original score. But today, we're going to take a look behind the scenes at how refused to bringing Johnny Silverhand's band, Samurai, to life.
I wouldn't write these lyrics for myself. So it's kind of interesting to get into like the mindset of who is this character and what would they write about, or what's their agenda. It's interesting to try to like catch a language that's his and try to catch a language that's like a part of this game. There is a reason why we're here.
It was Piotr maybe who was a fan of the band.
He knew Refused and he knew my voice and he said, oh, that's a perfect voice for Johnny.
And that they wanted, I guess, a sound that was a bit contemporary from when Johnny's supposed to have had the band, because he's sort of like an anti-establishment kind of guy.
Gonna drag a corporal rat on stage, make him kneel, douse him with gas, and light him up?
So of course there are things that you can relate to, and like just like this outcast and this rebel that's fighting against like the corporals, and that's definitely something that's been a part of my life and a part of Refused life.
We came out of the punk rock scene of northern Sweden.
He's like the future version of us, you know? So I think it makes sense. I think it totally makes sense for us to be here making these songs about him or for him, you know? So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No trills. But yeah, but like wide vibrato.
And then, I mean, just sort of build, yeah, slowly build sort of intensity.
We don't have a different mode than just going all in. So we really worked on these songs, trying to make them as good as possible. But then they're not actually our songs.
It's interesting as a musician to play another musician, because that's essentially what we're doing. I mean, we're not here as Refused, we're here as Samurai. And I'm here with Johnny Silverhand, you know? So it's like the voice we're representing here is someone else.
We'll never fade away!
It's been a mind fuck.
I mean, the shouting in itself is just like second nature to me, because I've been doing this for a very long time. But then when someone comes in and says,
I'm happy with everything except for Azza Lim. Again, it's Azza. Azza. Okay.
The shouting's great, or think of that accent, or think of that like enunciation. It's a bit weird because it's a very different way of singing when you're screaming like that, and it's hard to sort of
swallowing some syllables there.
Adjust your accent.
Oh yeah, just try it again.
So it's been a bit kind of frustrating.
It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great.
But I mean, I get it. I mean, we have to maintain the illusion that this character that's a character of the game also is me, like when I'm singing it. So it makes sense. But yeah, it's a bit different to have someone telling you exactly how to enunciate things, because I'm not used to. Usually people are just like give me a thumbs up, and then like you think of things like the rhythm, and you think about the pitch, and you think about all these things. But then someone comes in and like, that word sounded weird. I'm like, what? No, that's how I sing. But so it's been a very a bit painful at times. But it's all right.
City soon, I'm chipping in. Roll the bones, I'm chipping in. Bet that cone, I'm chipping in. Mayhem flows.
It's a very interesting thing to be part of. As a person that's not a gamer, I don't think I fully understand the impact that this might have. If people like these songs and if people are excited, then that's going to be great. I mean, we are spending a lot of times trying to get this right, trying to get it to sound like, like samurai would sound, So it's quite interesting. It's a very different way of making music, actually.
You can already find 3 Samurai tracks available on streaming services: Chippin' In, Never Fade Away, and The Ballad of Buck Ravers. But we're excited to announce a 4th new song called A Like Supreme, which is coming to streaming services today. That means you can check it out once the show is over. Don't forget that if you're tuning in late, or if you just want to watch anything again, we will be uploading everything to our channel soon. Next up, Pavel and I are going to introduce you to some creative ways that you can solve problems in Night City.
AV, I have a job for you. A client of mine is making an arms deal. He needs protection. It could get hot, very hot. The gun dealers are Maelstrom. Alas, nothing ever transpires as planned with them. You better gear up for this. So V, are you willing?
Yeah, I'm in.
Pavel, thank you so much for joining me. Now, there was an awful lot in that video, right? Because it's more than just guns.
Absolutely. We have
melee weapons, we have ranged weapons, we have cyberware, we have offensive cyberware, defensive cyberware, armor. We could talk for hours and hours about this stuff.
I think just for today's episode, we should keep it simple and let's just talk about guns. Can you tell us the different types of guns that will be in the game?
So we have 3 distinct types of guns in our game. We have power weapons, we have tech weapons, and we have smart weapons. Now, power weapons are the most similar to contemporary weapons. One thing they can do, which normal weapons cannot, is ricochet bullets off of surfaces. So you can hit somebody hiding behind cover or hiding behind a wall. Now, tech weapons, on the other hand, use electromagnetic power to propel a fully metal projectile to extreme velocities. What that allows them to do is to punch through cover or punch through walls to hit somebody who's not even aware that you're there. Smart weapons use guided missile technology to actually track targets in real time. So you can hit somebody who's dodging, running away from you, or you can hit somebody who's hiding behind cover.
So Pavel, Cyberpunk doesn't just contain FPS elements, right? It's also a fully fledged RPG. So can you tell us how you guys approached introducing those RPG elements into gunplay?
So I can tell you one thing, Holly, it wasn't easy to merge those 2 elements together. Now, we've spent a considerable amount of time merging the RPG and FPP side of our game. What the player will experience is that V changes from a small-time mercenary to a legend in the world of Night City. V becomes more and more proficient in using weapons as the game progresses. So they will see that reload times become shorter, the accuracy of your weapons grows, you will have faster aiming time, you will move faster with your weapons. Everything becomes more in your control, and that gives you more opportunities to defeat the biggest encounters that we've designed for you.
So I have prepared a few extra questions for you, Pavel, if you're feeling up to it.
Of course.
Okay, well the first is going to be, how do you find more weapons in Night City? Like, where will players be looking for them?
So I expect the players to look everywhere for new and exciting weapons. You can, of course, buy weapons at vendor shops, and they will house an entire catalog of weaponry that you can get. However, the best weapons that you can find will be taken from enemies or loot caches that we have everywhere in Night City. The weapons rarities range from common through uncommon up to rare and then legendary. And as they go in rarity, they actually climb in power. However, legendary weapons are very specific in such a way that they possess unique abilities that you will find on no other weapons in the game. The players will actually need to make some tough choices to find some legendary weapons, because maybe they need to choose whether to kill a person who holds the legendary weapons that they want, or to spare them because they like them as a character.
So next question, let's talk about weapon modifications. What mods can people give to their weapons in Night City?
So we have 2 types of modifications in the game. One of them would be modifications that we call attachments. So these would be scopes and silencers, and you can see them actually being attached to your weapon as you're playing the game. They give you statistics advantage, and they give you more opportunities in gameplay. The other part of mods would be software mods. Now, these are basically small chips that you install in your weapon, and they actually change the statistics of the gun. They can give you damage, they can give you accuracy, or they can give you more fire rate. Some of those mods actually change the gunplay on a more fundamental level, so they can give you non-lethal rounds, biochemical rounds, to tear through that armor even faster.
So I suppose for my final question, why don't you tell us about your favorite weapon then? Which is your favorite weapon so far in Night City?
Oh, there are so many weapons that it's hard to choose just one. But I can mention some manufacturers with their weapons that I absolutely adore. The first manufacturer would be Tsunami Defense Systems, who produces the sniper rifle Nekomata. That's a tech sniper rifle. That means that it can pierce through walls. So you can actually hit somebody who's hiding behind cover or who doesn't even know you're there. Of course, I also like a close quarters approach. And what that needs is a shotgun. One of the shotguns that we have in the game is Budget Arms Carnage. Now, that thing is cast from pure steel, and it weighs a ton. However, you can cut a person clean in half with it.
Another shotgun that I absolutely love, it's for a more refined approach, I would say, is a smart shotgun, Kang Tao Zhuo. That thing has 8 barrels, and that means it can track 8 targets independently. Now, killing an entire room was never simpler.
Pavel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm actually pretty interested to see what kind of weapons people discover when they play Cyberpunk for themselves. Before we end episode 2, this is a reminder that those who wish to dive deeper into the lore can now pick up The World of Cyberpunk 2077. This is a brand new book created in collaboration with Dark Horse Books that will give you an extensive look at what makes Night City tick before jumping into the game this November. That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget that if you've missed anything or if you just want to watch again, we will be uploading everything to our channels shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with Night City Wire Episode 3 soon.
All right, and we are back. That was awesome. A lot of good stuff there. I imagine some people are disappointed because it was kind of short, but you know, this is just like the first episode. They said it would be pretty short, but overall, Timur, what were your thoughts on what we saw?
Yeah, it was a lot of familiar things, so they kind of like expanded upon stuff that we already knew and restated a lot of it. But I think I got a good sense of the mood a bit more, especially in the Lifepath stuff, particularly for the Nomad stuff, which I'm sure one of you guys can speak to a bit more. But when it came to kind of like showing off the kind of feel of the world and of the game, I think this episode did a way better job of it than previous ones. Not that it's any sort of competition between them, but like I just got a good like sense of the world more from this one, and also having played it, it's starting to like color in the parts of it that are left a bit black and white for me after playing that. But yeah, it was a good episode. Got to see a bit more of Keanu, which I'm happy for, and some more like gameplay information about how you can kind of tackle situations. So yeah, good stuff.
Jean-Luc, what about you? Is there anything in particular that really stood out for you?
I definitely agree with Timur that the Nomad stuff was really interesting. Like them talking about like being a family and kind of like setting up that backstory makes me way more interested in the Nomad. I definitely also liked more the Corpo stuff I saw. Like they kind of I got to see more of the like what Arasaka Tower is. I feel like that could also be a pretty unique one because I imagine you don't get that much of an opportunity in the game to like just walk around like a corporate tower and just like see like the day-to-day stuff of like a corporation. Like you heard those people like just talking about like, you know, oh, we can't let this get out, you know, we have to and they're like, oh, they won't. Like I think that could be a rather unique intro because you kind of get to see the inside of a corporation in a way you probably won't with the rest of the game.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I'm kind of, agree with you guys in that the Nomad path seems like the most interesting. And a lot of what we saw in those like 3 trailers, do you guys remember like the GTA 5 character trailers? It kind of reminded me of that in a sense,
yeah.
But I digress anyway. It did, those trailers, at least the Nomad one, which I can speak to, showed a lot more than what I saw. So it seems like these life paths will be like consistent throughout your story. Like maybe as you're going through those 2 paths, the main quest and your life path kind of merge and you do some quests for characters there. You hang out with some different characters. And there's kind of like I don't know, they kind of alternate between main story, life path quests, and even like the Corpo stuff that we saw. It seemed like there was a lot more there than what Ed had explained when he played it.
Yeah.
But it seems like for the most part, you guys, after seeing that, are you guys more inclined to pick the Nomad path? Timur, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I think I'm having thought about it a little more, especially after seeing what they showed there, kind of like the outsider element of being a nomad and having your own tribe and that kind of stuff, and then moving into Night City as opposed to being a kind of, street kid, which is what I originally played and was leaning towards and always knowing Night City. I think that jives with my intended play style a bit better of stealth and non-lethality, and trying to, make my way through the game without making big waves, but still quietly becoming this legendary figure within the city that no one really knows about because I'm not out there shooting things up and, causing a lot of problems. I think that kind of vibes with me in the idea of the futuristic Robin Hood that I've got like ready to role play in my mind. I love the idea of coming from this kind of outsider group and then infiltrating this wide world of Night City and climbing my way to the top without anyone realizing I'm really there, other than the few essential people who need to know because I've come into contact with them. I'm starting to lean towards more that kind of feeling. And I also like what Jean-Luc said before, kind of like got stuck in my head. And I like the idea of, having a character that's new to the Night City in the same way that you are, so you don't feel like you've missed a beat by being a corpo or a street kid. So I'm starting to lean a bit more towards the Nomad.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things too that they talked about a little bit, but I'm curious to see how far it goes, is how characters play different roles depending on which life path you pick. Like a key character for the Street Kid path may not be a big character in the Nomad path, but there's still a chance you could meet that character. Seems really interesting, even to the point where like Jackie, for example, is when you play Street Kid, Jackie is like a childhood friend. While if you play Nomad, or sorry, no, if not Street Kid, if you play Corpo, Jackie is a childhood friend. Well, if you play Nomad, you meet Jackie at the beginning. So I'm curious to see even a character like Jackie, who's supposed to be a big role. I'm super curious to see how his story changes or dialogue changes, or even like you were saying before the show, like maybe he just won't survive as long in the Nomad path because he doesn't really need to be there necessarily because your family or your family that is kind of broken up is out there. That being said, though, Jean-Luc, after now having seen those trailers as well, are you leaning more towards Nomad as well, or are you still kind of thinking Corpo is the path for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same situation as Tamora, where I think the Nomad path seems way more interesting now. Like that backstory sounds like a great way to just like introduce you to the world. I think it's going to be a one a lot of people pick because it is that like perfect introduction to Cyberpunk. That said, I kind of have a sneaking suspicion the Corpo path might have more interesting story ramifications because you start out as like I think it's got a more interesting motivation because you're like kind of you lose everything and it gives you like this really strong reason to want to get revenge, to get back to the top. And then you have all these potential other characters in Arasaka that you would interact with over the course of the story. The fact that Jackie is your like childhood friend, I think would give your character more of a connection to them that would make their potential death more meaningful. So I'm not sure. I might end up going Corpo because I feel like I have a sneaking suspicion that it might later down the line result in some pretty interesting story ramifications.
So I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to play all three of them.
Well, okay, sure.
That's my answer. But I think I'm with Tamora. I'm going to start with Nomad because, like he was saying, that seems like a good introduction to Night City. You're a stranger as well as your character. So I think maybe after Nomad, it would be good to do Street Kid because then you actually kind of feel that familiarity with the city, right? That being said, all of them seem pretty interesting, though. I feel like they definitely spent the most time talking about Nomads. But after that, they talked about Samurai and how Refused is kind of taking on this role as Samurai and Johnny Silverhand. But I thought that section was super interesting. But I think the biggest takeaway from that section is something you pointed out, Jean-Luc, which we think might have something to do with Braindance. But do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so they kind of like hid it in there. They didn't really touch on it, but snuck in there. You have a bit where you're in first person and you're in the back of a concert hall, and then they show like you go out on stage, and you have Johnny's silver hand. And I was like, oh, this is a scene where you're playing as Johnny in a samurai concert. So I think what it probably is it's like a brain dance where you're reliving one of like Johnny's memories from like the 2020s where back when Samurai was still around. And so I think they're going to have, because Johnny's supposed to be like a really major character in the game. Like apparently Keanu has like the most speaking lines next to V. So he's like in the game quite a bit. And I think they're going to do a lot of diving into Johnny's backstory. So they're going to have these moments where maybe you get to experience scenes through Johnny's eyes. And I mean, you get to play as virtual Keanu Reeves. That sounds pretty cool.
Tamor, what did you think of that whole samurai refused mini doc they showed off?
Personally, I love the fact that even when they're doing like European death metal style to be like future or like rock and roll, like anarchist, punk rock, they still are so European that their like studio looks like it was constructed in IKEA, and everyone's really polite and like they do this screaming into the mic and then turn into the camera, and like how American musicians are, like they're like long hair, tattoos all over or whatever, and they lean into the stereotype of like punk rock. These guys are like, no, we're just clean cut Europeans that like to do some death metal or punk rock. I love that bit. Like the whole documentary part of it had some like Spinal Tap vibes to it, like where he's like screaming into the mic and then does a thumbs up into the camera as if like, yep, did some musics. But I like where the actual sound stuff was, or the soundtrack stuff is going, and also like the stuff that Jean-Luc pointed out. Like what I'm interested in seeing is like the brain dance stuff that we did in our gameplay demo was like a voluntary thing that V did as part of the heist. Like you kind of meet up with a character and she walks you through the brain dance, and then you do one here and there, and then you actually go into the scenario and it plays out in the same way. But I'm wondering if like the stuff with the brain dance and Johnny Silverhand's a part in it is a little more forced, because he basically it's implied that he sets up shop in your body and in your mind. So is that something where you don't really have influence over when that happens? Like is it just him? Like is it like an intrusive thought, or is it like Johnny Silverhand feeding you information? And if that is the case, like what is the potential for him to be an unreliable narrator, or like a kind of someone who's going to betray you in the end by feeding you the information that you need to know? Like what are his motivations here? What does he want out of it, and how can he manipulate his own memories and you experiencing his memories to get what he wants? So there's a lot of like mileage in that from a narrative perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jean-Luc.
Oh, I was just going to say that they have in the past actually said that your motivations and Johnny's motivations don't have to be aligned, and that there is that potential for you to become like not necessarily antagonists, but for you to kind of like split off or be working against each other. So I'm super curious about the idea of like the end of the game could have this huge variation where like maybe the end of the game could be this like dramatic showdown between you and Johnny in your head. That would be so cool. I want that.
I'm still like so into the idea of just having Keanu Reeves in my head.
But can you imagine if it's like out the modern day gaming's version of like the "Would you kindly" from BioShock, but it's Keanu Reeves saying "Would you kindly" in like that could be amazing.
So another big announcement, something that's available right now is a new song by Samurai or Refuse is released on Spotify right now. It's called "The Like Supreme." Like I said in the pre-show, there's already 3 or 4 other songs available that you can listen to, and I'm excited to listen to that after this. But I think the last thing they really showed off were the weapons, and they talked a lot about the weapons. Some of this stuff we already knew, but we'll kind of dig into it once again. And let's just start with weapon customization. What were 3 of the big things they kind of talked about when it came to weapon customization? Jean-Luc, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. So with weapon customization, I mean, it seems like they're kind of doing the typical video game. Like, I don't know if it's full on crafting, but you can, tweak your scopes and stuff like that. Which, yeah, I mean, like that's exciting. I don't know. It's pretty standard video game fare. I kind of expected that. I'm very curious in sort of like the variations of the type of weapons. They show like a little bit of some of like the different powers that you use, or the different like tweaks to them. There's the scatter shot, like a shotgun that like can bounce off the ground and stuff like that. I want to see more of that stuff. Like I hope there's some that they're saving, because I think the stuff they showed looks cool, but I want it to get weirder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. One thing when I played the demo a couple months ago is we didn't really get to mess around with attachments, but we did get to mod our weapons, and it definitely like one thing they mentioned is how it can actually like really change the way a gun feels, and that's something that I didn't notice, but probably because it was early, but that is definitely an aspect. Like different guns have different slots for software mods that you can plug in, kind of like in The Witcher 3, right, where you can if I remember correctly, you can equip like different, I forget exactly what they're called, but basically you can give like passive effects to your swords and stuff depending on I forget what they're called, like the jewels or whatever you'd equip.
Right.
But Timur, considering you played it and you got to mess around with weapons and stuff, did you notice any were you able to mess around with attachments or sophomore mods at all?
I kind of like I messed around with some of the kind of basic attachment stuff, which was like scopes and that kind of business, and it looked like it was quite versatile, which I really appreciated. I think I had a pistol which was silenced but also a scope on it, which meant I could like hide behind cover and take out enemies from afar and kind of manipulate walking patterns and kind of enemy movement from a distance to kind of sneak around. That was when I was actually getting involved in combat. For the stuff that they showed, like the main thing that I'm super happy that they talked about, like going back to Metal Gear Solid 5, which is probably the greatest stealth game of all time in my opinion. What I love about that game, and it's something that I wish that more games did, was it provides non-lethal options for lethal weapons. So you could take an assault rifle into a mission, but it would be all non-lethal rounds and tranq rounds or stuff like that. So you never feel cut out of gameplay. So watching most of this, they were talking about the guns, and I was kind of tuning out because I was like, none of this is probably going to work for me because I prefer to, do non-lethal stuff. And then right towards the end, they mentioned you do get the option for non-lethal rounds. There wasn't a lot of reflection on that or elaboration, so I'm not sure if that's for all the guns, just the gun that they were specifically talking about. Does it extend to like the high frequency blade or the cyberware, that kind of stuff? Are there non-lethal options for that? But who knows? We'll find out. But at least I appreciate the fact that they have thought about people who might take the non-lethal approach. I mean, I don't mind shooting and doing like virtual killing, but I just find more of a challenge in kind of figuring out non-lethal ways to do it, and I'm glad that they're not locking me out of all the cool weapons, because that would be a shame. There's far too many games where it's like, oh, you pick non-lethal, so that means you get to use this pistol for the rest of your entire 70-hour campaign in this game. But yeah, couple that with like some of the attachments. I hope it still works. I'd love the ability to shoot a non-lethal round through a wall to incapacitate an unsuspecting enemy, or like a long-range sniper rifle, like that it's a tranquilizer dart, like Mohsin Nagant from like MGS3, or like Ana from Overwatch or something like that. I'm excited. I hope that the non-lethal stuff is as comprehensive and as like baked into the entire combat experience as the lethal stuff is.
Jean-Luc, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Oh, my favorite thing was the cyberware. The potential of like, so they showed a couple options. They showed the blades, which we've seen before, and they showed the like gorilla arms, where you can like pull like giant heavy guns out of like turrets that you normally can't use or beat people up, and they showed the cannon. I don't know if this will be possible, but I would love to know if you could play the entire game just using cyberware and no guns. Like, can I just have all my weapons be my hands? And like, that's how I play the entire game. I get the feeling that's probably not the case. Like, I don't know if those are like versatile enough to actually be able to get through the whole game that way. But I would love to be able to do a playthrough where it's like, I don't use guns, I just use my cyber hands, and like they morph into different things.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing to bring up. When I played the demo, I actually asked one of the developers, like, because in Cyberpunk 2020, there's something called, what's it called? I think it's called like cyber psychosis or something. And it's if you are too cybered up, basically your character goes crazy because there's no body left, really. And I asked him if that's something you can do in the game, and he said no, because the character V, like, that character knows not to do that, so you are unable to do that. But that being said, there's still like a ton of like slots you can equip cybernetic weapons to, or cybernetic augmentations to. So yeah, to your point, I'm kind of curious to see how much you can just like equip weapons to that. Like, I wonder if I can get like eyes that shoot lasers or something like that, you know, something wild. They also showed off the different weapon types, and a lot of these weapon types they've kind of talked about or we've seen, but they formally kind of went through them. There's smart weapons, tech weapons, power weapons, and melee weapons. And melee weapons is something I want to talk a little bit more about, particularly in your case, Timur. Are there any melee weapons that you think could go along with this pacifist run you plan on doing? Because a lot of the weapons, once again, they showed are just like katanas and like I was using a lead pipe. Like, is there even a non-lethal weapon that you can think of that would help you out?
I'd love for them to make the katana work in a non-lethal capacity. I don't think it's impossible. Like, we have stun guns in most games that are like, you know, easily to use to kind of incapacitate people. I think if they had like dull blade, but with like a passes a current when you hit an enemy, that could be a way to make it work. Or even like, I'd love the idea of bringing in the kind of like Batman Arkham Origins style gauntlets that have a current running through it that when you punch someone, it knocks them out or something like that. Melee-wise, I would hope that there's something built into the cyberware that is non-lethal, that isn't like specifically just you're going to shred everyone. Mainly because that would mean I'm not able to use cyberware too much. I mean, obviously, if I decide I want to descend into some chaos and just use it, I can, but I try and avoid that as much as possible. But I hope there is an option for that. I want to be able to fire tranquilizer darts out my fingers like this, like finger gun style. That would be great. If I can do that, that would be sick. But I will take like a katana or even like a short sword or like a dagger. I love the idea of dagger. You know, everyone who watches Naruto will know Asuma's his knuckle duster blade, which has you can extend with chakra. Just remove the chakra, put in electricity, electric current, and you're in business. You can have that one for free. CD Projekt Red, crib from Naruto.
No, what you need to do, Timur, is just get the mantis blades and just take their legs off. That's it. It's not lethal. They can't follow you. You're good. So one of the last notes I have here that I did want to talk about is something that I kind of got glimpses of when I played the demo, but weapon rarities. They said they range from common, uncommon, rare, to legendary, I believe. That's something that was also in The Witcher to an extent, right? There was like common, uncommon. I think relic was like one of the toughest ones to find. But one thing interesting they mentioned was how a lot of these legendary weapons are tied to different quests, so you'll have to make difficult decisions in order to get legendary weapons. Jean-Luc, just to toss it to you, I was curious kind of like what you think about this whole weapon tier loot system, knowing that you play a lot of Destiny. So
oh sure, yeah, I mean, I'm into it. I love the idea of tying it to quests as opposed to like, I'm glad the game doesn't seem like it has like a grinding system or anything like a weapon rarity in terms of like, I got to keep looting these chests and hopefully I get a legendary. Like, if they're all tied to quests, I think that's the smart way to do it. That's the game's strength. I'm hoping the legendary weapons are where like the weird stuff comes into play that I was kind of talking about. Like, they've shown like, the smart bullets and the ricocheting. I'm like, yeah, that's all cool, but I want to see some like really weird out there stuff. So I'm hoping each legendary weapon feels like really unique and interesting, as opposed to just it's got the best stats. I'd be a little disappointed if it was just that. So I'm hoping we get to see some like unique guns.
Yeah, based on what they said, it sounds like they plan on doing some unique things with these legendary weapons. But, you know, when the game comes out November 19th, I'm sure we'll have some guides about where to get the coolest or best legendary weapons. But with that, is there any last minute stuff you guys want to bring up that we may have seen or that you want to touch on? Tamor, do you want to anything?
I think we're still trying to figure out whether we'll get to hear Keanu Reeves sing. I think we settled upon no, which is a shame, but I would love it if we got to see and hear Keanu Reeves sing. And now that between Jake and Jean-Luc, you've mentioned it, like, I really want to see Run the Jewels give me a quest. I would love that. I hope that they've gone the extra mile to like put them in the game in the same way that they, like, you know they've got them on board. So please, I hope they're in there. Give us some musical artists to get quests from.
Jean-Luc, anything on your end that stood out that you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
I just want to see more Johnny Silverhand at this point. I think that's the big thing everyone wants to see, not just because it's Keanu, but because I think Johnny is, like, to me, the most interesting part of the story so far. Like, you know, what exactly his motivations are, how that's going to play in, how do you interact with him? Like, is it, you know, do you get to have like full on conversations with him anytime you want? Is it like the, to make another Batman comparison, Batman Arkham Knight, where like, is he like the Joker where he just kind of like randomly shows up and like quips at you for like a second and then leaves? Like, I want to see how that narrative plays out throughout the game, and to what level can you interact with Johnny, and like, you know, can he become the antagonist? Like, can you have these, like, you know, is it like a Tyler Durden situation, right, where like he goes too far and then you have to stop him, like he took control of your body and like did something terrible, and then you have to stop Johnny. I'm so curious. Like, I think that's the most interesting part of the game.
Yeah, totally. I think for me, the big thing that I really want to know more about are how the relationships are going to work in this game, because that's something that they talked about years ago, about how like Cyberpunk features like very adult relationships, and I'm curious to see what they do with that, because that's something we haven't really heard about, and based on what they said, it sounds like they're very like non-linear in how they play out. So I'm excited to see where exactly they go with that, just in terms of like, you know, like, can I go hang out with Jackie and go play pool or something? Like, I'm thinking like GTA 4 style hanging out, where he's calling me up and being like, hey, let's go get drunk or something like that. And that's something I'm super curious about, because games typically don't handle that super well unless they're designed with those mechanics in mind. So I'm super curious to see how all that stuff plays out. But with that was the Cyberpunk Nightwire. Make sure to tune into GameSpot when this game comes out, November 19th. We're going to have a ton of stuff, but leading up until then, Jean-Luc and I are doing a lore series. We already have 2 videos up already. One is about the history of Night City, and then the other is all about Johnny Silverhand and his past, so make sure to check that out. And we'll have a new episode going up on Saturday, which is all about Arasaka, and you won't want to miss it. But with that, we'll see you next time.